There is belief running beneath much educational research that the highest form of knowledge we can produce is measurable, repeatable, and transferable. We are led to believe that the gold standard of research is something like the double-blind laboratory test, making comparisons between groups of learners to make irrefutable claims that are intended to stand outside context, claims that are simply true. This way of knowing does important work. In schools where budgets are stretched, time is scarce, and initiatives arrive with remarkable regularity, we are constantly asked to demonstrate impact, to show that what we do is worth the investment. Measurement, therefore, becomes not just a methodological preference, but a professional necessity. There's a purity to this logic, a clarity, an elegance that speaks deeply to the way mathematicians, myself included, are trained to think. But in education, we're not dealing with variables, we're dealing with humans. The problem is, humans, particularly children, refuse to behave like laboratory specimens. They leak, they spill over, they learn with bodies, with emotions, with fears, hopes and imagination. Humans are messy. Learning is messy. Yet in education we often try, earnestly, sincerely, to reach towards that scientific ideal. We run interventions, we measure outcomes, we calculate effect sizes, we seek patterns of statistically significant change. We try to answer, if I do this, will I get that? Even in qualitative studies, we feel the pull of positivism. How many of us would claim to be using a purely qualitative methodology and yet continue to code, categorize, count, and to put value in numerical data such as sample sizes? We reach, understandably, for methods that promise something closer to certainty than emotions and feelings. For example, there is a great deal of educational research on mathematics anxiety, or MA. This is a condition which is experienced in a variety of different ways. However, much of the research into MA tries to measure it, to apply experiences to a quantitative scale. My research journey began when teaching mathematics outdoors. Something was happening, not at the level of test scores or outcomes, something I could feel more than I could define. Teaching felt different. And yet, where is the method to capture that, to shine a light on that difference? Where is the scale, the coding scheme, the metric? How does one quantify a sense of peace? How does one measure the way a breeze shifts the emotional tone of the lesson? How do you calculate the effect of space, not as a variable, but as something lived? I found myself asking, is the gold standard of measurement really gold? Or have I become so accustomed to treating it as gold that I no longer question the currency? What if the highest contribution a piece of research can make is not to present something that is definitively true, but to bring into view something that was previously unseen? What if research is not always about pinning down reality, but also about opening up possibility? This was the beginning of a philosophical turning for me, one that at first felt like a betrayal of my discipline. As someone steeped in mathematics, trained to value precision, clarity, and the unequivocal, I had to confront something uncomfortable. The methods that excel at measuring may not excel at understanding. As someone trained in mathematics, I'm shaped by its values, its aesthetics, its commitments to precision and proof. And with that training comes a particular way of seeing the world. And that lens is powerful, but it's also partial. If I experience teaching mathematics differently outdoors, perhaps my learners experience learning mathematics outdoors differently too. But that possibility could not be tested, proven, or generalized in any meaningful sense. So my research approach and my wider understanding of the value of educational research had to change. My question was, what are the lived experiences of children learning mathematics outdoors? A question not designed to prove anything, but to listen for something. One that treats children not as data sources, but as experiences of a world we have not yet fully understood. And as I stepped into this new philosophical space, hermeneutic phenomenology, I learned that meaning is not extracted. it is unconcealed. The truth is not always universal. Sometimes it exists in singularity. That knowledge is not always transferable, but sometimes it is transformative. I found that outdoors children often feel safer. Anxiety loosens its grip. Curiosity expands. Learning becomes less defensive and more alive. Could any of that be expressed in a spreadsheet? Would any of it be true for other learners? Can this knowledge be reduced to a number? Perhaps not. But does that make it less real, less valuable, less reliable? Or does it simply mean that our tools of measurement are insufficient to capture the fullness of human experience? Today, I am no less rigorous than I was before, but I am differently attuned. I no longer aspire to prove, but to illuminate the previously unseen. I no longer seek certainty at all costs. I seek insight. And I no longer assume that the best research is the kind that concludes, but increasingly that the kind that opens. If I've become more decisive as a researcher, it's not because I have found firmer ground, but because I have learned to stand comfortably on a shifting surface, to recognize when numbers clarify and when they conceal, to know when to measure and when to listen. And I believe that we, as researchers in education, can embrace this broader palette of inquiry, this willingness to dwell with the unmeasurable. It may transform not only what we know about learning, but how we can come to understand learners themselves.